Hello, it's great to see so many people here, and welcome, very warm welcome from me. I'm in Wales in the UK, but it's nice to see people here from Germany. I used to live in Germany, in Berlin, and a lot of my teaching background includes teaching business English, both in institutions and in company as well, and lots of English for work stuff. So I think a lot of you are teaching in the same contexts. I saw that quite a lot of people are teaching in secondary contexts. I think you're going to find this session useful as well. And I just want to start by saying thank you for sharing your answers to the questions that we put at the beginning as you were coming into the room. There was some really interesting stuff there, especially in relation to what you understand by the term employability. So a couple of things that stood out for me. I noticed that somebody used the term a broad skill set, which I think you'll find is true when we go through this presentation. But somebody also mentioned 20th century skills, and I was very encouraged to see the word empathy there, because I think that's particularly important in these kind of contexts, and learning English as well. So we'll be coming back to that a little bit later in the session. So as Brigitte said, my name is Jade. I'm a teacher, I'm a trainer, and I develop language teaching materials as well. And I work very closely with the Insights team at Cambridge. And one of the things that we do is we carry out extensive research to develop frameworks to support learning and materials development. And one particular area that we've been working on is around employability skills. So the skills that learners need to function successfully in the workplace. So today's session, we're going to have a look at what the modern workplace looks like and how it differs from the workplace a decade or two ago. We're going to have a look at what the skills are that employees need to be able to function successfully in the workplace. We'll look at the role that ELT can play in helping learners prepare for employment. And we'll look at how we can integrate employability skills into our language classrooms. So there will be lots of practical ideas during the session that you'll be able to take away with you and use in your classrooms. So it is going to be an interactive session. I'll be asking you to use the chat box and to get involved. So please feel comfortable sharing your ideas. Okay. So before we get started, I'd like you to think about your profession. So for most of you, I imagine this will be the teaching profession. And I'd like you to think about this question. What key skills and attributes are most important in your profession? Now you can see that there's a framework on the screen here. It looks a bit like a pizza. So if you want to, you can draw this in your notebook or on a piece of paper if you have one handy, and write your ideas in the different segments. So we're aiming for 8 different key skills and attitudes that you think are valuable for your profession. So it would be great to hear some of your answers in the chat box too. Claudia's kicked us off with resilience. Nice. As a teacher, you need resilience, particularly maybe with the changing world and all the things that we have to stay up to date with. Okay, we've got loads of answers coming in. This is great. So patience, we've got respect and tolerance, being motivational, empathy, again, lovely. A couple of people saying empathy there. Communication, of course, very important as a teacher. Philip says, being ready to do things completely differently from what you've been accustomed to. That's really nice, Philip. I think what I like about that particularly is the idea that you're not just teaching the lesson, you're teaching the student, and everybody's different. So being able to adapt is really important. Doris says, yeah, being up to date, a sense of humor. Iris, I agree with you there. Open to changes, working with AI, curiosity. Okay, some lovely answers there. We are going to come back to those a little bit later in the session, and we're going to come back to this framework. So that will become clear a bit later, but thank you for sharing your ideas. So we're going to take a look now at the modern workplace. And I have another question for you that I'd like you to think about, which is, how has the workplace changed in the last decade? So this can be your own place of work or the world of work more generally. So what changes have you noticed? What have you been hearing more about when people talk about the workplace? What seems different or feels different to you? Okay, so we've got digital media, remote work. Yeah, I'm working remotely at the moment in my study in Wales. Technological developments, 24/7 availability. That's interesting, Irene. Yeah, unmotivated students. I think relating to that 24/7 availability as well, that kind of needing to kind of balance our own lives a little bit and make sure that work doesn't take over our other aspects of our life if we're working from home, maybe. AI and what you need to be able to do so as not to be replaced by it. Yeah, very current topic at the moment. Andreas, everything is on the internet. So lots of working online, working from home, a lot of distance. And then we've got perhaps mental health issues with students as well. And maybe that's related to the change in working environments. Ulrika, burnout again. So there's a lot of overlap here. So you'll see that I've put 3 images on the screen, and I chose these images to represent 3 different key aspects that show how the world of work has changed in the last decade. So I'm going to talk about each of these in turn. So the first one here is about digital workspaces. So a digital workspace, as I'm sure you're aware, is a set of applications and online tools, much like the room that you're in now, that enable colleagues and companies to communicate and to collaborate from different locations. And one of the most prominent transformations in day-to-day work in recent years is the increased use of digital communication platforms and virtual collaboration software. So between 2021 and 2022, the number of Microsoft Teams users increased by 145 million. That's quite a drastic increase. And 89% of Zoom users now use the platform for business meetings. So this reflects some of the changes in workplace practices. The second picture that I chose here represents remote and hybrid working practices. And a few people said remote in the chat box, but hybrid as well. So remote working is the practice of working from home or in some place that is not the organization's usual place of business. And hybrid working is a mixture of in-office and remote working. And these practices give workers greater flexibility in both time and in location, of course. So many employees can adapt their working hours to suit their lifestyles, and they no longer need to be based in the same location as their organization. And for potential employees, what's interesting about this is it creates employment and career growth opportunities on a global level. So we're not necessarily limited to working for a local organization anymore. And then global interconnectivity. So a couple of people in the chat mentioned globalization. So this term refers to the way in which companies and teams are connected across geographical locations around the world. And because digital workspaces, online work platforms, help to overcome geographical barriers, remote and global workforces are predicted to grow. So a study last year showed that more than half of company decision makers expect their employee networks to become more geographically distributed over the next 5 years. And this results in more international, more multicultural teams and increased global collaboration. So these are some of the key features of the modern workplace. And of course, there's overlap between these different aspects, and some of them enable others to take place and they influence each other in a kind of ever-evolving way. But what does this mean for employees? So what are the skills that employees now need to function in this changing world of work? Well, research conducted by Harvard University, the Carnegie Foundation, and Stanford Research Center found that 85% of job success comes from having well-developed soft skills and people skills. And only 15% of job success comes from technical skills and knowledge, or what we would call hard skills. So employability then is about more than having the right qualifications, the right technical skills, and the right knowledge. What employees also need is to be able to do these kind of things. I'm going to give you a moment just to read the boxes on the slide here. So we use the term employability to describe these types of transferable core skills and attitudes. And hopefully this gives you a broad impression of what the skills are that learners need for employment. And of course, you'll notice some similarities between your ideas in the question at the beginning of the session there as well, these kind of broad 20th century skills. So where does ELT fit in? Well, we know that English is the dominant language of the internet, of science, of academia, and we know that it's the preferred language for international business. And somebody mentioned English language learning in the chat, in the question at the beginning there. So for employees that are working in international and in geographically dispersed organizations, English language proficiency plays a really important role. And a study into the correlation between knowledge of English and the probability of being employed in Germany, Italy, and Spain found that higher levels of English skills are associated with a higher probability of being employed. And a lack of English language proficiency is frequently given as one of the top reasons for unemployability. So the importance of English language is inherent there. But English language teachers are also in a unique position to include core employability skills into the teaching of English. So when we think about the English language classroom, these kind of skills, things like communication and collaboration, they are inherently part of language learning. And language learning itself helps learners to develop employability skills. So there's a really nice link there between English language proficiency and the teaching of English and the development of these kind of skills that enable us to be more flexible and adaptable and so on. So in contexts where English language learners are preparing for the workplace, it makes sense for us to integrate employability skills into our teaching. So with all of this in mind and understanding the role that ELT can play in developing employability skills, Cambridge has developed what we call the Employability Skills Framework for ELT, for English language teaching. And by providing a map of the most important employability skills, the framework allows teachers to get a deeper understanding of what each of the skills involves and to integrate them more systematically into their teaching. So you'll see here that there are 8 competencies. And for those of you that are familiar with the life competencies framework, you'll see some similarities. So the employability skills framework is aligned to the Cambridge Life Competencies framework, but it looks more deeply at these skills in workplace contexts, and particularly for employees or potential employees, people that are preparing to go into the workplace. And in the framework, each of the 8 competencies is broken down into 2 or 3 core areas. And then each of these core areas has several components, and these give a deeper insight into the skills involved. So just to share an example with you, this is the collaboration and teamwork competency. You'll see there are 3 core areas there. So we've got working well together in a group, completing collaborative tasks and projects, and dealing with conflict. And each of those is then broken down into several components. Now, we're going to share a link to the framework at the end of this talk, and you'll get that sent to you on a handout as well. But this is just to give you an idea of how it helps to break down exactly what we mean by employability skills. And these are skills that are not only essential for learners in higher education and in at work contexts to develop, but they're also really valuable to start thinking about at secondary stages of learning. And I know that a lot of you are teaching in secondary contexts. So what I really want to show you is some classroom activities that help to develop these skills. So we're going to have a look at a few different things, and I'll be asking you again to get involved. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is this. Remember this from the beginning of the session. So this is called development pizza. It looks a bit like a pizza. And it's a reflection and self-assessment tool that helps people to assess and set appropriate goals for their own development. And you can use it in relation to any profession or job. So at the beginning of the session, I asked you to identify the key skills and attributes that are most important in your profession, in the teaching profession. The example that I've got here, I've put this together for the type of skills that someone might consider important for working in human resources in an HR department. And of course, answers will vary according to learners' professions, but they might include things like customer service, negotiating skills, conflict resolution, creativity, etc. Now, once your learners have identified the 8 key skills and attributes that they consider to be most important for their field of work, or the field of work that they're going into, they can also start to think about which of these they most need to develop, where they need to progress more and where they need help. And you can ask them to shade these areas in the pizza, so you have different colors for different slices, like in the example that I've got on the right here. And of course, it's really valuable to have learners share and discuss their drawings and explain which labels they've chosen. And then you can move on to discussing how to develop these skills in each area. And the employability skills framework that we saw earlier, and which I'll share again later, can help you to identify practical ways of doing this. So this activity, this development pizza framework, helps learners to improve their professional development and management skills, because what they're doing is they are evaluating and setting personal goals for their own professional development that is relevant to their field of work. Okay, let's have a look at another activity and let's get some of your ideas in the chat box. So I'd like you to think about what makes a bad employee. What are some things that bad employees might do? Put a picture on the screen here just to inspire you, but let's get your answers in the chat box. So what are some things that bad employees might do? Okay, so Frederick saying a bad employee might be demotivated. Yeah, so what action might that result in, Frederick? What might they do that shows that they're demotivated? Stephanie saying not trustworthy there. Okay, loads of things coming in now. Unwilling to cooperate. Yeah, unreliability. Don't collaborate with other people but work against each other. Too much pressure. Unwilling to work in a team. Barbara, they don't concentrate on their actual job. Yeah, so maybe a bad employee spends a lot of time on social media or doing other things rather than actually working. We've got, yeah, laziness there. Speaking ill of others, that's a nice one. Yeah, that's a really good example, I think, of something a bad employee might do. We've got inefficiency there. Bullying, yeah, nice example there. What else do we have? Okay, too much life in work-life balance. Okay, so is it better to have an employee that spends too much time working and not enough time resting, or too much time resting and not enough time working? Finding the balance is important there, isn't it? Okay, we've got finding problems in every possible solution. Lack of collaboration or communication engagement, negativity, fixed mindset. Yeah, really good examples there. Things that you don't want in an employee or in a colleague. We've got sharing knowledge or information. Okay, so if you don't share knowledge or you don't share information in your workplace, then that could be a bad trait. Okay, thank you for sharing your ideas. I've put some things on the screen here, some examples of things that they might do that are not really acceptable in the world of work. So falling asleep at your desk, bit of a no-no in some cultures. Taking a long time to reply to emails, always complaining about other people. Somebody said that in the chat box. Arguing with customers, maybe. Things like wearing very strong perfume or other sort of antisocial behaviors in the office if you're not working from home. And using a cat filter on video calls, for example, is not very professional. So with my class, once they've come up with some ideas for things that a bad employee might do, then we talk about how managers regularly review the performance of their employees and give feedback, positive and negative, constructive. And then we use a role play activity. So I ask my students to choose 2 or 3 of the behaviors of a bad employee that learners have identified. And I ask them to work in pairs. So I have one learner playing the role of the manager, and they have to give feedback to their employee who does these bad behaviors, and the other student playing the role of employee who has to listen and respond to their manager. And there's a really nice opportunity here for some language development, because notice there that the role of the manager is to give feedback, but to be tactful. So I've put some examples here of how we can adapt our language to be more tactful by making statements less personal or less direct and softening the impact of what we're saying when we have to give negative feedback. So these are some strategies that you might want to explore with your learners in preparation for a role play task. And this activity, of course, it helps learners to develop their communication skills and to adapt the way they communicate for different audiences and for different purposes. So I call this activity bad employees or being tactful. Okay. Let's have a look at something else. So this is about working styles. And I'd like you to think about which of these 4 styles on the screen best describes how you work together with other people. So maybe you're an action person. Maybe you like to just dive in, try things out, experiment and see what happens. I definitely like to do that. I like to experiment. Maybe you're the kind of person that likes to look at the big picture. Maybe you like to step back and look at all the different possibilities and all the different options before taking action. Maybe you're a detail person. Maybe you like to know the details of everything before you take action. Or maybe you're a caring person that likes to know that everybody's feelings and views have been considered before acting. Now, most of us are a combination of these things, but challenging question for you. I would like you to decide which style best describes how you work together with other people. So which of these is dominant for you? And we're going to have a poll on the screen now. So Brigitte, if you could start the poll for us, that would be great. And in this poll, you can only choose one result, I'm afraid. Okay, so we've got answers coming in already. Interesting. Let's see how this pans out. I'll give you a moment just to think about that. While you're answering that question, I'll just tell you a little bit about how I use this in the face-to-face classroom. So I will put 4 big pieces of paper around the room and ask my students to go and stand closest to the style that they think most represents them and how they work with other people. And then they can have a look around the room, have a look at their classmates, and see if there's anything that they weren't expecting. Maybe they think, oh yeah, I know this person. They're definitely in that corner over there. Or maybe there are things that surprise them about their peers, and that's particularly good if they know each other well. Okay, so we're going to end the poll in a moment. I think most people have answered, so we'll see the results on the screen there. We've got 39% of people, so the majority of people chose big picture. That's interesting and really important, I think, particularly in the teaching profession. And then close second, we've got action, followed by caring, followed by detail. And of course, in the teaching profession, all of these things are really valuable, but it's an interesting challenge to try and identify which one is dominant for you. Okay, thank you, Brigitte. We'll end the poll now. So When learners have identified which of those working styles is most dominant for them, then I'll put them together into 4 groups. So I'll have a group for each of the styles. So an action group, a big picture group, and so on. And I ask them to think about these questions that you can see on the screen here. I'll give you a moment just to read through those. And I think this is a really nice set of reflection questions for exploring the way that we work with other people. And question 4 particularly works really well with students, kind of understanding how other people might perceive your working style. And what's nice about this activity is that, as well as helping learners develop collaboration skills by exploring how they work together with other people, it also helps to develop emotional intelligence, because they're demonstrating self-awareness and they're developing empathy and positive relationship skills. And empathy is something that a couple of people mentioned in the question at the beginning about what employability involves. Okay, thank you for taking part in the poll. We'll have a look at another activity now. So this is called Other Perspectives. And we start with a work-related problem. So this can be anything. This could be something that learners encounter in their course materials as part of a reading text or a listening text or a video text, for example. And we put the problem in the center. So you can use a kind of framework like this if you want to, or you can just get learners to make notes and chat, however you like to work with your students in your context. And I like to use a kind of framework like this because I think having something that students are expected to make notes in encourages them and motivates them to actually fill those spaces. So I'm a big advocate of using kind of visual frameworks for students. So the work-related problem that I've chosen here as the example is the company computer network isn't working. Uh-oh. And then I ask learners to think about how other people that are involved, other stakeholders, might view this problem differently. So I've chosen an employee, a team leader, a customer, and an IT manager here. And the examples that I've put are, so for an employee, company computer network isn't working. An employee might think, yeah, great, can't do any work. I can have a break. Lovely. Go and make a cup of coffee. But for a team leader, it might be a bit different. They might think, okay, it's not working at the moment. There's going to be a big backlog of stuff, and this is going to mean a lot of work for me later on. So that's maybe quite stressful. For the IT manager, company computer network isn't working. Huge amount of pressure. Need to get this problem fixed as quickly as possible because it's impacting on lots of different people. And for a customer, perhaps they can't get through by internet or on chat box, or maybe they can't get through on the phone because the system's down. So frustrating. So this is kind of exploring the different perspectives that people might have about the same issue. And so this helps learners to develop a creative mindset. They're thinking about things from different viewpoints, and this improves their innovation and their problem-solving skills. And as I say, you can use this with any kind of work-related problem, and any other problem doesn't have to be work-related because it's still problem-solving and helping learners to develop those skills. Okay. So this activity is digital reputation. So your digital reputation, this is people's perception of you based on what they see online. So my question for you is, what are some things that might contribute to a bad digital reputation? And I'd like you to share your ideas in the chat box. There are a couple of people typing. Okay, Lara, oversharing online, on social media, perhaps. Oversharing, giving too much information about yourself might make people think badly of you. Cynicism, Andrew. Yeah, that's an interesting one. So we reveal quite a lot about our personalities, don't we, when we share information online? Sabina says pictures or embarrassing pictures or posts. Yeah, so picture of you really drunk at a party on a Friday night on social media doesn't necessarily look good for employers. Being drunk, again, being a party person, depends on the job, I guess. I mean, maybe if you're a party planner or something like that, then sharing lots of photos of you at parties might be a good thing. So it's always context dependent, but generally not advisable, is it? Doris says an awkward homepage. Doris, what do you mean by awkward? Do you mean things like embarrassing photos, or do you mean not very clear, not very well designed? What do you mean by awkward, Doris? What else have we got? Angelina, following certain people. So reputation, political attitude. Okay, really interesting. Do we share our politics online? How important is it? What impact does it have on our digital reputation? Christine's got indecent pictures, cyberbullying, putting others down. So the way we interact with other people in online contexts as well contributes to our reputation, our digital reputation. Philip says using the wrong digital channels. That's interesting. Yeah, so maybe there are appropriate channels for different aspects of our lives. Offending people who have a different opinion to you. Claudia, too much on it. What too much on? Do you mean too much on social media, Claudia? Maybe that doesn't create a good impression. If you're always on Instagram and posting everywhere, then an employer might think, oh, you're not really doing your work. Or okay, Doris, so you're saying badly designed and not easily accessible homepage. Yeah, interesting. So that kind of, it says something about you, doesn't it? It says something about your abilities, your digital capabilities. If you have your own website and it's not very well designed, it's not a great look. That's a really nice example, Doris. Thank you. Andreas, reflect too aggressively. Okay, so the way that you communicate again with other people. We've got some really great answers here, guys. Thank you for sharing. Philip, expecting immediate reactions and contacting people late at night. So that's a really interesting one, because I have this, I work in international context. So sometimes I get emails late at night. The question is whether I respond to them and how that looks if I do. So yeah, that's a really nice, that's a nice example, expecting immediate reactions. How many days need to go by before you send a follow-up email saying, hey, did you receive my email? Wrong tone in emails. Okay, we've got some really lovely answers here, guys. Thank you. These are some of the things that I came up with. There's a lot of overlap there. Offensive comments, embarrassing photos, a few people said. Personal information, so maybe oversharing or sharing information that doesn't reflect well in a work context, references to bad behavior. And this one I think is really interesting, sharing false information. So for not fact checking the information that you're sharing. And of course there is a danger of that happening, because so much of what we're consuming online is very succinct and it's very short, and it's just shared and shared and shared and shared, and finding the source of something and critically evaluating that source is really important. So we want learners to think about the actions that they take online and how these might impact on their digital reputation. So when they encounter digital communication texts as part of their course, so things like social media posts or emails in a course book, chat room conversations, websites, things like that, we ask them to think about these questions. So is the content likely to be good or bad for the reputation of the person that wrote it? How might that information look to a potential employer? And if the person that wrote it is in employment of some form, does that information reflect well or reflect badly on the employer, on the company or organization that they work for? So another question for you, this isn't on the screen, so you'll have to listen carefully, is how does this relate to employability skills? What skills are learners developing by doing this activity, by thinking about these questions? So what kind of employability skill are learners developing by carrying out this activity, by thinking about digital reputation? Okay, fantastic. We've got digital literacy right in there. Great. Critical thinking, self-reflection, good judgment. Yeah, which I guess is part of critical thinking. Self-reflection, change of perspective. Yeah, looking at things from another perspective. So that's in the realm of innovation and problem solving, isn't it? Understanding different perspectives. We've got using appropriate style, tone, and language. So that's communication. Reflecting on how your employer sees what you do. Okay, so again, that's looking at things from different perspectives. Communication and collaboration skills. We're thinking about how we come across to other people, thinking about how your individual actions might affect your company, reflecting one's communication skills. And Philip, generally reflecting on how what you do reflects on you. Yeah, lovely. I love how much you're participating, guys. It's fantastic. Thank you. Some really nice ideas there. I mean, I would put this in the realm of digital literacy, but you are absolutely right that it crosses a broad range of different skills that we need for employability. Those things like collaboration and communication, really important as well, and critical thinking. So you're absolutely right. Primarily, they're kind of learning about how to maintain their personal and professional well-being, which is a key part of digital literacy. But it's a really useful activity for getting students thinking about how they come across and how that might impact on their future careers. And of course, everything that we put online now stays online, so we have to be really careful. Okay, thank you again for your participation. I'm going to show you another activity now. So this is coat of arms, it's called, and you'll see why in a moment. But my question for you is, what makes a good leader? So thinking about leadership skills. A few people typing already. Okay, fairness. Yeah. Empathy again, Catherine. Yeah, it comes up, doesn't it? And it's so important for communication, for interacting with people in different contexts from different cultures. Walking the talking. Nice. Okay, so don't just, do what I say, do what I do as well. Lara says holistic perspective. So maybe going back to that working style, looking at the bigger picture and understanding everybody's role within something. That's really nice. We've got coaching, Barbara. I like that. That's really cool. Definitely. For teachers too, I think, as well as we're a form of leader in a way, aren't we? Inviting team members into decision making. So inclusivity there as well, making people feel valued is really important. Frederick, someone who has a good overview but enough empathy and actually makes decisions. Good. Yeah, nice description. We've got motivating. We've got acknowledging employees' achievements. Again, making people feel valued, really important. Inspiring, motivating, supporting, mentoring, willing to change and adapt to the new. We've got express clearly what you expect from your team members, being consistent, being supportive, one who can inspire others. Yeah, really lovely ideas. And of course, your students will have very similar ideas and lots more, I'm sure, about what makes a good leader. But the activity here, so let's move on to that part. So once learners have brainstormed their ideas and discussed in class what they think makes a good leader, then we ask them to design a coat of arms. So a coat of arms serves as a representation of a group's standards or their principles or their values and culture. And of course, you can design this however you like, but one of the nice things about a coat of arms is that it needs to be fairly quick, fairly straightforward to interpret. So we can't overcrowd it. We can't put all of those ideas on the coat of arms. We need to be selective. We need to think about what's most important for us. So we ask students to design a coat of arms and think about how that design will reflect what they think is the ideal leadership style. And we can have them write a motto as well to reflect their personal values. And it's a lovely activity, this, because students are being creative, but they're also thinking about those kind of skills and those styles, and really connecting with what they value and what they think is important, but considering how other people might see that differently again. So as well as encouraging learners to be creative, we're also helping to develop their leadership and their global citizenship skills as they consider and they identify what kind of qualities are beneficial for leadership and for managing groups of people. So that's a really lovely kind of practical activity. And of course, students can do that on paper, or they can do it digitally as well if they're, you know, familiar with various digital tools for that sort of thing. Okay, so we have had a look at 6 different activities. You'll remember the development pizza from the beginning. So we talked about the key skills and attributes that are valuable for your profession. We looked at a bad employee's role play activity for being tactful. We looked at different working styles. You voted in the poll on which is the most dominant working style for you, and then we talked about how other people might view you and what you value in other working styles. We had the other perspectives activity with the work-related problem in the centre, and then different stakeholders' perceptions around the edge. We had the digital reputation activity, so analysing how digital text might influence how somebody perceives the writer. And then the coat of arms activity. So my question for you is, in your classroom, in your teaching context, which of these activities can you see yourself using with your students? Which of those are useful for you? And feel free to say why in the chat box as well. Okay. So Sabine's saying all of them except for the development pizza. Okay, interesting. We've got working styles, bad employees. Bad employees is fun. Students like it because, you know, they get to role play, and role plays are always engaging and good communication practice too. Andrea says working styles, other perspectives, digital reputation, first 3, all of them. Okay. Good. So it's really nice to see that some of this content, some of these activities are useful for you, and hopefully you feel like you can take some of these into your classroom and use them with your students. Okay. So I'm going to share some links with you now. So if you've got a mobile phone, then I'd say have that handy, particularly if you're viewing on a screen. I'm going to show you a QR code here. Don't worry if you can't see this, if you can't scan this, because I'll put a link in a moment into the chat box. But also we'll be sending these to you, the links to these on the handout as well. So if you scan this QR code, or if you follow the link that I'm just about to put in the chat box, this will take you to the introductory guide for the employability skills framework. The framework, this is where you can find the framework and a breakdown of what the core skills and components are within that, along with some practical ideas and explanations of what the framework involves as well. Thanks, Julia. So feel free to scan that. Don't worry if you haven't had time, because we will be sending it out on the handout as well. Okay, so that's the introductory guide to the employability skills framework. I'm also going to share this with you. So this is a link to the Cambridge World of Better Learning blog. But this takes you to a particular part of the blog that looks at it's the employability page. And you can find a series of posts on there that explore the 8 competencies in the framework in more detail. And they have lots of practical teaching ideas for how to develop those skills. So I'll put the link for that in the chat box too. Hopefully you can see that. And again, don't panic if you haven't had time to scan the code. We will send them to you. And finally, I'd just like to share a link to this. So this is the employability skills module. So if you're looking for specific learning content for these skills, this module has been developed for adult and young adult learners at B1 level and above, and it's informed by the Employability Skills Framework for ELT. It's a digital online module. You can use it in class and or at home, so you can have learners do the work with the module on their own and then feedback in class, or you can do some in class and some at home. And I'll put a link to that in the chat box as well. So that's the Employability Skills 8-unit module. Okay, let me just pop that in there. Okay, so all that remains is for me to say thank you for joining us, and a special thank you for participating so brilliantly in the chat box. Really enjoyed your answers, and it's lovely to see you engaging with it.